Hi everyone, and thanks for joining us. Today we're going to talk with Raja a little bit about their S4 upgrade project. Look, for many of us who work in the SAP world, it's been really hard for us to get to S4. And there are so many different ways to achieve this. And look, I think a lot of people are still struggling with how to transition to S4. And so there's no better way of listening to somebody who's actually done it. And today we're going to hear their story and a fairly innovative way of how to transition to S4. So let me first introduce Raja to say a little bit about herself and her company, Inventia.
Hi, Stephen. So glad to be here and talk to you guys today. I'm the Director of Information Technology and Nutriventure at Inventia Healthcare Ltd. Inventia Healthcare is a pharmaceutical company. We've been in business for more than 35 years. We are the pioneers of NDDS in India, and we continue today to stay on the leading edge because of our technology platforms, and even more importantly, because the effective use of our technological systems. So that's just a little bit to kind of get you started and give you an introduction of Inventia.
Fantastic, thank you. Look, your organisation, Raja, has moved to S4, and I think there's so many of us that work in a lot of the traditional industries around EAM and supply chain, haven't. I guess, how does your organisation use SAP, and what's the sort of scale of usage of SAP is there?
So we've been heavily invested in the full suite of SAP modules. So, CO, EC, FI, pretty much everything since 2009. And we've been ahead of the curve in many ways because it is very rare for an organization our size in India 10 years ago to be so heavily invested in something like an SAP. But we were very aware of the fact that for optimal business results, it was imperative for us to improve and integrate our records, our data, and our business workflows. So without digitizing and organizing our critical enterprise modules like, your financial controlling and accounting, sales and distribution, quality systems, material management, and production planning, we were not going to be able to maintain the agility that we need to in this extremely competitive pharmaceutical industry. So today we depend on our SAP landscape to really drive real-time business benefits. And we therefore chose to explore a very fast conversion of our existing SAP EHP 7 to S4HANA 1909, and that too on the cloud, and with an extremely ambitious go live during the entire global COVID-19 pandemic.
Wow, that sounds pretty impressive. Well, it sounds like you've got a pretty big footprint in your business. So I think it's a good example to talk about how to build a pretty compelling business case for S4. I think as we look around the industry, I think one of the things that we use in our business is we often hear, too expensive, too slow, too complex, as people are talking about S4 upgrades. I'm convinced there's a better way. Tell us a little bit about how you guys went about it and what your S4 project involved.
So, we went with an S&P Bluefield approach, which I think was, I think we're the first in India to have done that. And some of the very, I would say, impressive facts about our upgrade was that like I said, our implementation was 100% remote, and it was in the midst of COVID-19. We had a very minimal business disruption of less than 20 hours of downtime. And we observed a 30% improvement in our reporting with real-time insights. So besides this, our business process registration, we saw about 100 new functional enhancements, about 40 standard Fiori apps, 6 custom Fiori apps, all deployed during the implementation. And we had multiple partners involved in the entire process. So when you look at too expensive, too slow, and too complex, I think we beat all of those things, on the head in terms of not being too expensive, definitely not being too slow, and definitely simplifying the entire implementation.
So you can do it. Like, interesting. Well, as you look at your user base, what sort of numbers do you have in terms of users in your business?
In terms of users, we have, I believe, about 150 licensed users. We also have about 50 odd different users who use the application for just approvals. So it's a much smaller footprint that way, but since we started in 2009, technically 2011 is live, I would say the first 2, 3 years, there was a lot of rubbish data because we were just getting started. This was the first big digitization process. We didn't start by digitizing a single form. We directly went with SAP. So that was the amount of data that we were sitting on, and the way the data was honestly a bigger problem that we also started looking at during the transformation.
Brilliant, brilliant. So you talked about SMP Bluefield. I think there's a lot of people out there who don't have a great deal of knowledge of what Bluefield is. A lot of people are familiar with Greenfield, starting fresh. A lot of people are familiar with Brownfield, where I always describe it, you put the CD in and upgrade it, you upgrade your existing system. Tell us a little bit about SMP and what that means, and how that helped you to take a new approach to your upgrade.
No, absolutely. And I hope I do justice to explaining people what SMP Bluefield means. It's really a very highly automated, software-driven, and an end-to-end S4 transformation approach. This was honestly one of the first key enablers for us for a very fast, secure, and remote implementation of a project. And I would especially attribute our ability to adhere to a very aggressive project timeline to the entire SMP Bluefield approach, because it took a very mature and industrialized approach to the entire process. Now, some of the key benefits that we saw was, first, we did what they call a 360-degree blueprinting and simulation. And simulation being the key. I mean, we live in a day and age today where we can simulate so many different things, and we can visualize what things are going to look like. So why not with an with an S4 HANA upgrade? So in the preparation phase, we were able to scan and analyze the entire source landscape, plan and simulate the configuration of our desired target landscape, and compare different transformation scenarios using the Crystal Bridge approach, which is SNP's end-to-end automated transformation platform. And that is what gave us an extremely accurate outcome with almost no question marks at the end. The other thing was around data integrity, because it has been over 1.5 years since we've been live. And one of the most fascinating things for me is that we have not observed even a single error in our data migration. And lastly, for us, it was also combining multiple projects into a single go live. So this was not just us wanting to upgrade to S4 HANA, but we also wanted to move to AWS cloud. We also realized that we want to even reduce our data footprint. So the fact that we were able to combine all of these multiple projects into a single big one, and get away from running a data center ourselves, significantly improve our RTO and our RPO, which is our recovery point object and our recovery time object, improving our disaster recovery significantly. All of those were what we were able to combine into a single project.
Yeah, it's a very interesting thought, isn't it? Because for most companies out there are looking to one, upgrade to S4, and then two, also move data centers sort of to the cloud. And so yes, for a lot of people, the two-step process seems such a long way to go, whereas you guys managed to do that in one project and in one process.
Yeah, and it's generally just a risk aversive kind of strategy to do that. Like, let's split the project into multiple simpler projects, right? Why make it so complex? There are too many moving parts. But because of the fact that we were able to simulate, we were able to reduce our footprint, and S&P's Bluefield technology really allowed us to, like I said, combine these multiple projects into a single one. Overall, we saw, not just a reduction in the overall cost, because multiple projects would have costed us a lot more, would have taken us more time. And I'm talking only about the tip of the iceberg, right? There's a lot underneath, and God knows we would still be talking about doing some of these things, right? And we are done. So that's what's amazing for us. So really, the entire automated approach gave us the flexibility to pick the best data, pick the processes that we want to transform to get to where we are. And the cherry on top for me was really the fact that we were able to do this with minimal business downtime, minimal kind of cost investment, and a huge reduction in the entire risk profile of the project.
And look, and again, you think back to the business case. If to do those two steps in one, certainly helps the business case. Go up for a business case for infrastructure, and then for S4, is more challenging. You've got to try and find more benefits, and benefits are usually the problem with an S4 upgrade. And if you can bundle those together, then certainly heading in the right direction. I think the other point that you made around the S4 system scan is an interesting one too, because it provides that data-driven approach, which means that it's not a finger in the air. There's sort of a science behind the complexity of your project and understanding where your system is today to be able to plan for where you're going to go with it with S4 and the SMP tool sets.
Yeah, it's kind of strange to say this, but when I first heard about the S&P Bluefield approach, I kind of knew it that's what we want to do. So it was modeled our entire project around it, because I'm like, if I can get something so sure, like it's a sure thing. So if you can go for the sure thing, why kind of beat around the bush and try, these other approaches?
Absolutely. Dan, in your planning, did you look at a traditional upgrade? Did you look at the two options sort of side by side and then go, oh, you know what, the Bluefields one is just a better value proposition for us?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, of course, we had to make the entire case for the cost benefit, time, understanding and weighing the pros and cons of the different approaches. So Greenfield was, of course, out of the question because this was an upgrade project. But looking at, when you look at a traditional brownfield upgrade, and there were several partners that looked at us and say, you don't need, why would you need to go with this? Just go for a brownfield. Yeah, it might take a little longer. There are certain risks involved. But like I said, if it was a sure thing, I didn't want to go in that direction. And the entire team and the leadership was behind us. And we said, this is what we're going to do.
Fantastic. So if you look back on your project and you've got some amazing stats, we'll explore them a little bit more in a minute. What do you think was the biggest benefit of the approach with SMP? I mean, you've spoken about data, you've spoken about your low downtime, you've spoken about duration of project. I guess, what's the biggest standout for you?
So I think the biggest one was, like I said, that it was the fact that we had an option to now go for a big bang approach. Right, and that within a very predictable time frame of 5 months. I mean, honestly, if you tell somebody, you tell somebody today that you want to do this in 5 months, they'll be like, get out of here, sorry, we don't want to do it, right? So that's really where we started, and we were not looking at just a technical upgrade, but also a functional, a process enhancements, along with the entire cloud implementation. So with S&P Bluefield, we saw a 50% reduction in the business downtime, which was a substantial time saving when we compared to traditional approaches. And one of the important metric for us was also a 40% reduction in our data footprint, which gave us a lot of cost efficiencies. And one also important thing to note in our strategy was that we saw an 80% reduction in our total cost of ownership, with only a significantly improved, with a very significantly improved data disaster recovery strategy. So that for us was, I think, the biggest benefit. So from what was a negligible disaster recovery, right, which, I mean, when you have an SAP system, it's mission critical. You honestly can't take a downtime of 72 hours or more, which is where we were at. And we didn't see any other way of improving that unless we were going to invest significant amount of money in just the DR, forget the software and the upgrade. So we saw almost an 80% savings in our DR. And like I said, now we have a near zero RPO, a near zero RTO and a very close RPO, so which is amazing. And with the cloud-based system, we also achieved a significantly reduced CapEx because with a lot of these kind of projects, your initial CapEx investment is huge. So the fact that we were able to move to the cloud gave us the scalability that we would require in the future with an extremely small CapEx footprint. Right. And that was like a huge thing for us.
Yeah, and I think another interesting point, and you mentioned it earlier, was that it was around your data as well. I mean, being a pharma company, heavily regulated, data is important to consistency of data, and it seems that and then people follow on to security, data security, sovereignty, all those sorts of issues. You seem to be very comfortable with the way that the process has worked, and that everything is as it should be, and it's an approach that's worked very successfully from a data and regulation perspective.
No, absolutely. I think honestly, this was not one of our objectives when we got started. We didn't say that, okay, let's look at also our data, right? We were just like, okay, we're just going to upgrade, move what we have to a new platform. But the fact that we were able to start looking at our data, run different simulations and understand, okay, slice and dice the data and see exactly what data set do we now want to bring forward into the new system. That was extremely important for us. And the fact that we did everything within your 21 CFR Part 11 guidelines, with extremely tight documentation, became very important, because that's just something you cannot kind of oversee very lightly in this landscape that we work in.
Yeah, exactly. Like, interesting. Like, I mean, in a lot of the industries we work in are not as regulated, but if we look to the Australian market, and a lot of the energy companies, Australian distributors, transmission companies, and essential service providers are bound by sovereignty laws and issues like that, and have concerns around their data. I mean, it's a very robust process that seems to be applied here. As you look back on your project, you're on S4 and you've been up and running for a little while now. I guess what have you learned from your projects? What can you take away from your projects as ways to improve for next time?
Yeah, so I think the one I would want to give credit to our team. So I think that was very important, having that team of champions. So when we did our implementation in 2011, first 2009 to 2011, it was the same core team. And I think about 80 to 90% of the members were still the same in 1920. So that investment of our internal teams was very crucial. The pre-planning, in which we spent a lot of time looking at, the different scenarios with the technology that S&P had, was crucial, because with the multiple partners that we had involved in the project, that helped us really tighten the scope, make sure that we are extremely focused about what we're doing, and there were no surprises at the end. So those were, I think, some things that honestly, after doing this project, we are now taking a lot of these learnings into all of our subsequent projects, whether SAP or not, right? Because they're the same. And I wish there were tools like SAP Bluefield available in some of these other systems that we as in the pharma industry use today.
Yeah, I think exactly. We've got to challenge our existing thinking around some of the traditional ways, like the traditional brownfield upgrade, just don't work in a more modern environment. They're too slow. So yeah, it's a very clever approach. And look, as we see in our customers, the good thing is that this is cross industry. It's available to everybody, and we're seeing more and more clients starting to jump on to the Bluefield approach. Is there any advice that you take away from your project and then say to others in terms of how they approach their S4 projects, or some really compelling lessons that they can take into their S4 business case?
No, absolutely, Stephen. So in the interest of time, I'll name three. The first is the investment that an organization can make in pre-planning and using an automated technology like S&P Crystal Bridge, right? It's an investment. So with us, the task involved looking at selective data migration to the new S4 HANA landscape, time slicing the data modules, looking at organizational entities and aligning the interfaces. And this really ensured that all the application functionality was converted to the latest S4 HANA, and it removed the risk of problems caused by transaction data that sometimes cannot be converted. So that was number one for me. Number two was, please rethink everything. If you're right now in an on-premise system, do think about the cloud, think about systems that allow you to combine multiple projects into one, because that's kind of the future. So if you are just doing an upgrade, don't stop there, do more than that. And last but not the least is build your team of champions, because honestly, without that, we could not have done this project.
Oh yeah, what a brilliant learning! I think that is by far the most amazing. Look, I think as a service provider, the thing that I love about what you've done is that you've spent your money in terms of your upgrade dollars getting to S4 very quickly, which leaves more money to go and an investment opportunity in the system itself. And there's nothing worse than seeing, these very large, ungainly S4 upgrade projects, and there's never money left at the end to actually drive improvement in the system and the way that people use it. It's all spent on the upgrade, whereas you've been able to get it done really fast, very effectively, and then you can focus your investment on system improvement rather than just, an S4 upgrade. There's essentially a hygiene activity.
Yes, absolutely, Stephen.
Fantastic. Look, thank you. We really appreciate the opportunity to chat to you, Raja. It's been a very insightful learning from your organisation. I think if we look to the Australian market, S&P is becoming more prolific in the market. People are starting to consider a different approach. And I think it's a really exciting opportunity for us all. So thanks for your time.
No, absolutely. It was a pleasure to be on the air.
Brilliant. Now we've got some opportunities to ask Raja some questions, and we thanks to everyone who's added them. So I guess the first one, Raja, we have is around what was the amount of data that you had to be transitioned as part?
Yeah, so in terms of the exact volume, I can't speak to an exact number, but it was definitely in gigabytes, not in terabytes, thankfully. But it was about 10 years of data, and of which I believe the first 2 or 3 years, which was when we first got onto SAP, was not very great data, like in the sense of a lot of things missing, things that we were learning along the way. So what we ended up doing is when we were in the pre-planning phase and we used the Crystal Bridge, the entire blueprinting process, we were able to look at our data. And there are two things that was a massive difference between your SAP EHP 7 versus in S4 HANA was in EHP 7 data that is replicated within the system. So purely by transitioning from that legacy system to an S4 HANA, we automatically saw a reduction in the data footprint. And on top of that, we were able to look, we looked at all of our profit centers that were not, active anymore. So we were able to close things, we were able to clean the data. And that itself, all of these two things combined gave us about a reduction of 40% on our data footprint.
Wow, that's amazing. Look, I think it's interesting because I don't know if you saw the poll that I was posting, but we talked about a lot of the people who fed back the complexity is one of the biggest challenges that people face. And I imagine you spoke there about EHP 7 and you went straight to S4. You talk about a little bit how your complexity was reduced in the project.
No, so definitely, I think it can be very disconcerting at the beginning to be like, okay, how do we start and where do we start? I think that's why my first conversation with S&P, about a year ago was very enlightening, because I'm like, okay, there is a more systematic way of doing this, because if you were to do a very traditional brownfield approach, it would sound very daunting. But because we worked with them, there were two aspects. Like I said, the pre-planning helped a lot. We were able to understand exactly what would happen, how it would happen. We were able to take a very, kind of a automated. I mean, I'm also a software engineer by profession, so I understand all of these things. And I'm like, if we can do a systematic way of, kind of rolling this out instead of somebody, teams working and trying to figure out the data and doing a very traditional brownfield, it would make sense. So that in itself reduced the complexity significantly. So I've said this before too, definitely investing in the pre-planning can help reduce the complexity. So we were able to take kind of this giant project and simplify it down to the team. And then we had excellent partners. So we did not just have S&P. We selected a partner who helped us with the entire implementation and the CSV. And we selected yet another partner who purely helped with project management. And the last thing that helped us the most was also our core team, which is our SAP core team, who we've invested in for the last 10 years, who were part of our initial implementation. So they were also very instrumental. And it took us, 5 months. I've heard of companies doing this over 2 years, millions of dollars spent on it. And we've done it at a fraction of a cost and in, I think the fastest possible. I don't know if there's an award or there's a Guinness Book record for it we could apply for.
Well, yeah, I think you probably have hit the world record for SAP upgrades, which is excellent. But I think, you obviously have a very capable team. What did you do with your own internal teams to help develop them into being S4 ready?
Yeah, so our entire operation actually has been supported by, like I said, the core team. We have a ABAP developer. We only had a single ABAP. So these things used to always be issues for us. So moving forward, there are two teams now that support us. we have a team that looks after the entire solutioning, building, Fiori apps, and especially because now we are on S4HANA. So while we've taken functional upgrades during the implementation itself. So that was also the other benefit of being able to do the upgrade, plus do the enhancements, plus move to the cloud. So now we are constantly working with our team. So we have our consulting partner who sits with us in our weekly SAP calls. We look at what are the things, what more improvements can be done. We have with our head of departments to say, okay, these are all the features that are now available as part of S4HANA. So which ones do we prioritize? How do we roll these things out? And last but not the least is our team that cloud front. So keeping the systems running. We've gotten our, the entire disaster recovery system enabled as well. So all of these things, we broke it down into smaller chunks. The upgrade, the functional enhancements happened first. Then the support partner came on board, who was part of the original project. And then also looking at doing the DR, which over a period of time has kind of helped with the entire supporting, system for this. And the same SAP core team is still very heavily invested. So weekly meetings, quarterly detailed reviews, regular management updates. I mean, all of that's still part of it.
Yeah. Oh, look, it's an amazing model. I think if you look back and think about the cost and the time associated under a traditional model for doing all the things that you've done, you've understood your system, you've moved to cloud, you've moved to S4. You haven't had to go through multiple upgrades to get there. It's a pretty impressive story to tell.
No, absolutely. And I would want to make sure that I do give credit to my entire team. I was the only person who said, let's do Bluefield. That's it. And then the team did all the magic. So I wouldn't want to take any credit for it. But definitely, I think without that, we would still be, having issues. And the other most impressive thing about our upgrade was that it's been almost a year and a half, and we've had zero errors. Like, we have gone through multiple ITGC audits, different types of other audits, and in general, like, it's not something that we've rolled out and then we're like, oh my god, you see this, and then you're starting to kind of a domino effect of be like, okay, where else are the issues? So we've had zero data errors in the entire upgrade because of the entire automated approach.
Amazing. Look, I think the great thing is now that your team are in the world of opportunity, and as you mentioned, that you can now look at functional improvement. And I think if you wind back to where we started, this discussion was about business case and reducing complexity and speeding things up. I mean, I think you've nailed all those, and I certainly think that these upgrades should be the path of least resistance to get you to S4, and then spend your dollars on functional improvement and driving better value out of the system.
No, absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
Brilliant. Well, thank you. Thanks very much. A quick plug for Think 180. We're giving away an S&P system scan. So if you're interested in registering for the scan, it's worth around 20,000 Australian dollars. So go to our stand and check it out and register. We'd love to give it away. Thanks, Raja. Really appreciate your time. It's been really insightful. Thank you.
No, thank you, Stephen. And thank you for the entire team at the event for arranging this.